All right, everybody, welcome back for another uh, deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we are tackling something,
Yeah.
something that I think a lot of people have probably noticed, but maybe haven't thought about too much.
Mhm.
And that is this whole idea of like, you know,
Mhm.
when people are learning a new language,
Mhm.
sometimes it seems like certain sounds just really trip them up,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
You hear this all the time with, English language learners.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure if any of us have tried to learn a new language, I'm sure we've run into this ourselves.
Mhm.
But we are looking today specifically at this challenge for native Japanese
All
speakers
right.
learning English.
Welcome back,
Okay.
everyone. You know how we do
And we've
things
got this
around
really,
here.
really
It's time
cool
for another
research that
deep
we're going to
dive.
dive into to see
And
if we
today,
can figure
we're
out
going to be
why
looking
this
at a
is.
grammar
Okay, cool.
concept
So why
that
is it
might
that,
sound
for
a little
example,
intimidating
Yeah.
at
a
first,
Japanese
but
speaker
stick with
learning
us.
English
You got
might
it.
mix
And you
up
know what?
words like
Grammar
rice and
might
lice?
not always sound like the most
That's kind of the
thrilling thing in
classic
the world,
example, right?
but this
Right,
time
yeah, you
I
hear
think
that one
we've
a
got
lot.
Like,
something
why?
pretty
Yeah.
cool
Why
to
is that
explore.
happening? I
Well,
totally agree. We're talking about the perfect infinitive.
Perfect infinitive. Yeah, it's one of those things that might make you think back to those grammar lessons way back when, but trust me, it's more interesting than it might seem at first glance.
It really is. And to kind of give everyone a roadmap for where we're headed today, we're going to be drawing from a really interesting snippet about advanced grammar techniques.
We're going to try to really break down what the perfect infinitive is, how it works, why it matters for how we use language every single day, and maybe even touch on how other languages handle similar ideas.
Okay, so I think a good place to start is just to make sure everyone's on the same page. When we say perfect infinitive, what exactly are we talking about?
So, in the simplest terms, the perfect infinitive is a way of talking about an action that was finished before another action in the past.
Okay, so it's all about the sequence of events.
Right.
We're dealing with the past here,
Yeah.
but with two actions happening at different points in the past.
You got it, and our snippet actually gives a great example that illustrates this perfectly. The example is, she seems to have forgotten her keys.
Okay, she seems to have forgotten her keys. Right, so how does that show what we're talking about with the perfect infinitive?
All right, so let's break it down. You've got the seems part of the sentence that's happening right now in the present, but that to have forgotten part, that tells us that the forgetting happened before the present moment.
I see. So even though the whole sentence is about what's happening now, that little piece, to have forgotten, is like a flashback to an earlier action.
Exactly. And that's the power of the perfect infinitive. It lets us layer these different time frames within a single sentence. It adds this depth to our communication by showing us how events are connected, and it's all thanks to that past participle forgotten.
Right, that forgotten is key here. It's signaling that the forgetting is already done and dusted. It's a completed action.
Exactly. It's that past participle, that form of the verb, that really does the heavy lifting in the perfect infinitive. And the structure is super consistent. You've got to have plus that past participle of the main verb.
So to bring this back down to earth a little bit, think about those everyday situations where you might say something like, oh, I must have left my phone at the coffee shop. You're realizing something in the present, but you're also referring to an action leaving your phone that happened in the past.
Absolutely. And that's a great example of how we use the perfect infinitive naturally without even really thinking about the grammar behind it. It's how we make sense of these little mysteries in our lives.
Totally. So far, we've mainly been thinking about the perfect infinitive from the speaker's perspective, like how we use it to express ourselves. But I'm wondering about the flip side, the listener's perspective. Does being aware of this grammatical structure actually change how we analyze what someone is telling us?
You know what? That's a really insightful question. And honestly, I think the answer is a resounding yes. Because when you understand the perfect infinitive, you start picking up on these subtle hints about cause and effect, about intention, even about how reliable the speaker might be.
Whoa, okay. So it's not just about understanding the order of events. It's like a whole other layer of meaning that we can unpack.
Right. You start to notice how a speaker connects past actions to their present observations, and that can give you a lot of insight into their thought process. Think about, let's say, a detective in a movie or a book. They might say, the thief appears to have entered through the ventilation shaft.
Oh yeah, that's classic detective talk.
Exactly. And with the perfect infinitive there, we instantly understand that the entering happened before the appearing, the detective's observation. It adds the sense of intrigue to the story.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on how the perfect infinitive works in English. But you know me, I always get curious about the bigger picture. How do other languages handle this idea of an action completed before another past action?
That's a great question, and that's actually a really fascinating area of linguistics. Because while many languages have ways of conveying the same sequence of events, the specific tools they use can be wildly different.
So even something as seemingly basic as talking about time can vary quite a bit across languages.
Oh, absolutely. Some languages might rely on different verb tenses to show the order of those past actions. Others might use auxiliary verbs like have in English, but maybe a different verb altogether. Some might even use adverbs or special particles or even entirely different sentence structures to get the point across.
Wow, that's amazing. So even in this one small area of grammar, we're seeing this incredible diversity and creativity in how humans have developed ways to communicate.
Isn't that awesome? And that's one of the things I find so captivating about language. Even when different languages have different ways of doing things, they're all ultimately striving to express the same core ideas.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to wrap up on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the perfect infinitive.
And as you go about your day, try listening for it in conversations, in books, in movies. You might be surprised how often it pops up and how much it adds to the richness of what you're hearing.
It's like a little secret code that's been there all along.
Exactly. And once you crack that code, you start to see the world of language in a whole new light. Who knew grammar could be so exciting?
All right. Until next time, happy listening, everyone.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today,
Echo
we're
in.
going to be talking about stylistic variation in writing.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I think this is one of those topics that is really exciting for us to kind of unpack together.
for sure.
Because everybody writes, right?
Right.
I mean, you're always writing something, whether it's an email to your boss, a text to a friend, or, you're working on your dissertation or
Yeah.
maybe writing a novel. Who knows?
Absolutely, yeah.
So many different kinds of writing that we do. And today we're going to kind of go deep on this idea of stylistic variation in writing.
Yeah.
And we have some source material that's defining stylistic variation as adapting different registers and styles to fit the purpose of your writing.
Right.
So I guess maybe we could start there. What exactly do we mean by registers and styles?
Yeah, so you can think of registers as like levels of formality.
Okay.
Right. So like, if you're talking to your friends, you're going to use a very different register than if you're, say, giving a presentation at a conference. Right.
Or writing a research paper, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And then styles are kind of broader categories. So, like academic writing versus journalism versus like the kind of writing you see on social media.
Okay.
So there are all these different styles of writing, and they all have their own kind of conventions and expectations.
I see.
And so stylistic variation is really about being aware of those different registers and styles and being able to adapt your writing to fit the situation.
Oh, that's so interesting. So like our source material uses this example of a company's annual report.
Yeah.
And, obviously that's going to be written in a very formal style.
Right.
Because they're trying to project this image of professionalism and authority.
Exactly.
But then you think about like an informal email to a colleague about that same report. And obviously that's going to sound completely different.
Totally different. Yeah, you might use slang or colloquialisms,
Yeah.
You might even like crack a joke or two.
Yeah.
But it's still professional communication. Yeah.
It's just that the register is different.
It's just the tone is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can actually make a big difference in how your message is received.
Right. And I think sometimes people can fall into the trap of, either being too formal or too informal in certain situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I remember this one time I was emailing with a professor,
Oh, yeah.
and I accidentally replied to his email with like, LOL sounds good.
Oh, no.
And I was like mortified.
Yeah,
Because obviously that was not the appropriate register for that situation.
you're right.
But yeah, it just goes to show how important it is to be aware of these different registers and styles and to use them appropriately.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess, thinking about our listeners and like what they can take away from this,
Right.
how can people become more aware of these different styles and registers in their own writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one thing is just to pay attention to the writing that you encounter in your everyday life. Right. So like, when you're reading a news article or a blog post or even just like a social media post,
Right.
pay attention to the language that's being used and try to identify the register and style.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can start to think about how you might adapt your own writing to fit different situations.
I see. So just being more mindful, I guess, about how language is being used
Exactly.
and how it can be used effectively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that.
I think, another thing is just to practice, right? So,
Right.
like, if you know that you're going to have to give a presentation at work,
Yeah.
practice writing out your speech in a formal register.
Okay.
Or if you're writing a cover letter for a job,
Yeah.
um, practice writing it in a professional style.
Okay.
So the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with using different registers and
So
styles.
kind of like flexing those different writing muscles
Yeah, exactly.
and getting stronger in all of those different areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
And then I think the last thing I would say is just to, don't be afraid to experiment,
Okay.
right? Like, there's no one right way to write.
Yeah.
And so, try out different registers and styles and see what works for you.
So be playful with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And have fun with it, because writing should be enjoyable.
Right.
And so, if you're not having fun with it, then you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. So stylistic variation is important because it helps us to communicate more effectively. It helps us to build trust and credibility with our audience, and can also just make our writing more interesting and engaging to read.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a really helpful deep dive on stylistic variation.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess I would just encourage everyone to, as you're going about your day to day and you're reading different things or you're writing different things, just kind of take a moment to be aware of the stylistic choices that are being made.
Right.
Right. And just think about, why is the writer using this particular register or style? What effect are they trying to create?
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway. Be mindful. Pay attention to the language that's being used around you and in your own writing.
Exactly.
And yeah, like you said, experiment and have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye. Bye.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with me. And
Ah.
so we're going to get into something today that sounds a little bit,
A little dry, maybe.
yeah, a little bit on the academic side.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting
Oh, it's very fascinating.
and kind of cool once you start to see it.
Exactly.
So we're talking about nominalization.
Yeah.
So what is nominalization?
Well, in a nutshell, it's when we're taking verbs or adjectives.
Yeah, words that are about actions or description.
Yeah, exactly. And turning them into nouns.
Okay, so,
So like a thing you can grab.
yeah, like a solid object or a concept.
Okay, so give me an example.
So a really good example that we use a lot in language is the verb discover.
Okay.
To discover something, but we can turn that verb into a noun discovery.
Right, like the discovery of America
Exactly.
or the discovery of, I don't know,
Penicillin?
penicillin, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a bunch of other discoveries.
Oh, yeah, tons.
So the discovery of fire.
The discovery of fire changed human history.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big one.
Yeah, and I think that sentence is really illustrative because we're not focusing on the person who discovered fire.
Right.
Like, we don't even know who that is.
Right, we're talking about the discovery itself.
Exactly.
This monumental thing.
The event itself and,
I mean-
and that change and focus, I think that's what nominalization does. It allows us to talk about ideas as if they were things.
Okay, so we've got a grasp on, like, what it is.
Yeah.
But why should we care?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah, like, how does this affect our understanding?
Well, I think one way is that it can change the tone and the impact of our communication.
Yeah.
So let's say we have two sentences. One is they researched the topic extensively,
Okay.
and the other sentence is their research was extensive.
Okay, so the first one we have the verb to research,
Exactly.
and the second one we have their research.
But we've nominalized that verb to research. And what do you feel when you hear those two sentences? What's the difference in your mind?
Well, the second one definitely feels weightier to me.
Exactly.
Their research was extensive.
Right. It just sounds more authoritative.
Yeah, and like official somehow.
Right.
Like I want to trust their research more if they say it that way.
Exactly. And it highlights the research itself rather than the people doing the research.
So it's like the difference between someone doing something and then the thing itself.
Exactly.
Like the research is this separate entity.
Right.
It's an object almost.
Exactly. And it has its own weight and importance.
Okay, so is this like a good writing technique?
Well, it can be.
Okay.
Like any tool, it depends how you use it, right?
Right.
You can have too much of a good thing.
Sure.
Too much nominalization can make writing really dense and hard to follow.
Okay.
Like imagine trying to eat a cake that was made entirely of frosting.
I mean, it sounds good at first,
It does.
but I think I'd get sick of it pretty quick.
Exactly. It's
Which
just too much. You need that balance.
Okay, so where else do we see nominalization?
Oh, it's everywhere. I mean, think about it. Legal documents, they're full of nominalizations.
Oh, yeah.
Scientific papers, academic writing.
Right.
But it's not just that even everyday speech is peppered with nominalization.
Okay, give me an everyday example.
Well, how about I need to analyze this data?
Yeah, okay.
Instead of saying I need to analyze this
Yes,
data.
yeah.
So we've taken that verb analyze and turned it into the noun analysis.
Right.
So it's more formal, but it might sound a little bit stiff.
Okay, so it's everywhere.
It is.
And I never even noticed it before.
Right.
You know, I'm starting to think about all those times I read something and just felt confused.
Yeah,
And I wonder if that was part of it.
it could be.
You know,
It could be.
Too much nominalization.
It's definitely something to watch out for both as a reader and as a writer.
Right.
So next time you come across a passage and you think, gosh, this is just dense,
Right.
see if you can spot the nominalizations.
Okay.
And try to unpack them.
Unpack.
Back into verbs and actions
Okay.
and see if that makes it clearer.
That's a good tip.
Thanks.
So listeners, next time you're reading or writing, pay attention to those nominalizations.
Yes.
Because they're really shaping the meaning
Yeah, exactly.
and the impact of what's being said.
Absolutely.
And it's just this hidden layer of language
Yeah.
that's waiting for you to discover it.
It's really cool once you start to notice it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to be looking for it everywhere now.
You will. You totally will.
I might even start using it more myself.
There you go.
All right. Well, this has been another deep dive.
It has.
Thank you all for listening.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are going deep today
Deep dive.
on participial phrases
Yes.
and clauses.
Uh-huh.
So these are really interesting. They're kind of like,
There's sneaky.
they're sneaky. They're like ninjas
Yeah.
in your writing, sneaking in all this information.
I like that.
And you sent over some really great stuff about them.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this because I find them fascinating and they can really help elevate your writing.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just jump right into an example that you sent over. It's pretty basic, but it's walking along the beach. He found a seashell.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so simple,
Yeah.
but it packs a punch.
Yeah.
And so like we've got this phrase walking along the beach, and
Yeah.
that's our participial phrase.
Right.
But you could also say while he was walking along the beach, he found a seashell.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it's so much more concise just to say walking along the beach. It
Yeah.
just sounds so much better.
It does. And it also kind of puts you right there.
Yes, exactly.
Like-
You're on the beach, you can
Mhm.
feel the sand between your toes.
Exactly.
And so that's what's so cool about participial phrases is that they add all this, like detail and immediacy without,
Yeah.
weighing down your sentences.
Absolutely.
And so, walking along the beach, that's using a present participle, but you can also use past participles.
Oh.
Like, exhausted from the journey, she collapsed on the bed.
Right.
So exhausted is our past participle.
Okay, so we've got present and past. So are there any other variations, or is that kind of...
Yeah, so there are participial clauses,
Okay.
and those are a little bit more complex. They include the participial phrase
Uh-huh.
plus other words and phrases
All right.
to kind of modify it even further.
Got it.
So for instance, having finished his work early, John decided to treat himself to a movie.
Oh, so it's like a little mini sentence
Yeah.
within a sentence.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think, you see like professional writers using these in all sorts of interesting ways.
Mhm.
And I remember reading this novel once, and, the author used all these participial phrases
Yeah.
to describe this like bustling marketplace. And it drew me in,
Yeah.
It's like I was right there.
That's so cool. That's actually one of my favorite things about doing these deep dives, is because then you start noticing
Yes.
all these things that you never even thought about before in
Mhm.
your everyday life.
I know.
But okay, so I feel like, with great power comes great responsibility,
Oh.
right? So is there anything that we need to watch out for with these? Are there any pitfalls?
Yeah. I mean, the big one is the dangling modifier.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah. And that's basically when, like, it's not clear, what noun the participial phrase is modifying.
Okay.
So, like, for example, running down the street, the ice cream cone fell.
Oh, so the ice cream cone is running. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But not probably what the writer was going for.
Exactly. So, you got to be careful about that.
Right.
You got to make sure that your participial phrase is right next to the noun.
Yeah.
It's modifying.
Like right next to it.
Like right next to it. Yeah. And then, there's also other variations where, maybe there's not even a noun for it to modify. Or it's like modifying something that doesn't even make sense.
Okay.
So you just got to be really careful.
So it sounds like they can be a really powerful tool,
Oh, yeah.
but we just have to kind of,
Wield them carefully.
yes, use caution.
Yes.
But wouldn't you say that they can really kind of elevate your writing in a way that,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah?
Once you like understand them
Yeah.
and you feel comfortable using them,
Uh-huh.
you can really, make your writing more sophisticated. You can, make it more engaging for your reader.
Yeah, it's all about like mastering
Yes.
the tools of language.
It is.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so I think the big takeaway here is that participial phrases and clauses, they're awesome.
They're great.
They're great, but
Be careful.
watch out for those dangling modifiers.
Yes.
But as you go forth and write,
Yes.
think about, how you can use them to really create different effects in your writing. Can you use them to like build suspense? Can you use them to add humor?
Oh, yeah.
Could you maybe even use them to like paint a picture
Absolutely.
with your words? I don't know.
The possibilities are endless.
They are. So go have fun
Yes.
with participial phrases
And clauses.
and clauses. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are diving deep today. And
Diving deep.
yes, diving deep into a grammar concept.
Oh, fun.
That might make some of you a little nervous.
Yeah.
It's the perfect participle.
Ooh.
But don't worry.
Don't worry.
We're going to make this fun.
Yeah.
And trust me, understanding these perfect participles
Yeah.
can totally change the way you write and speak
For the better.
for the better.
Yeah. Much clearer.
So much clearer,
More effective communication.
more sophisticated.
Totally.
So, okay, let's start.
Okay.
At the very beginning, what is this thing? What is a perfect participle?
Well, it's basically a verb form
Okay.
that shows us that something happened
Right.
before something else in the past.
Before.
That beforeness is like super important
Okay.
because it helps us tell the story in the right order,
Got it.
like a timeline in your sentence.
So like a grammatical time machine.
Yeah,
that.
exactly. You're like jumping back in time a little bit.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So for example, our sources mention this sentence. Having finished his work, he went to bed.
Okay. Can we break this down?
Yeah. So having finished his work,
Yeah.
that whole chunk, that's your perfect participle phrase.
Okay.
So that tells us that he finished the work
Like-
before he hit the hay.
Okay, but couldn't we just say he finished his work and went to bed?
You could.
Like, what's the difference?
So there is a difference.
Okay.
When you use the perfect participle,
Yeah.
it kind of shows that finishing his work
Yeah.
was the reason why he went to bed.
Oh,
It's like cause and effect.
got it.
But if you just say he finished his work and went to bed, it's just like two things happening,
Right.
one after the other.
Yeah, just a sequence.
Exactly.
It's not really clear if one caused the other.
Exactly.
Okay, so the perfect participle is like secretly saying because
Yeah.
without actually saying it.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
It's like a shortcut to a more sophisticated sentence.
Okay, I'm starting to see the power here.
And there's even more to it.
Okay.
You can have active and passive perfect participles.
Ooh, fancy.
I know, right? Present and past perfect participles.
Okay.
So you've got all these different ways to show how actions relate to each other in your writing.
So it's not just about like sounding smart.
No.
It's about really being clear and precise.
Exactly.
And also like fitting more information
Yeah.
into fewer words.
Exactly.
That's powerful.
It is.
Now, all this time we've been talking about writing, but this
Yeah.
applies to speaking too, right?
Absolutely.
Like I could say, I saw the movie and I loved it.
Yeah.
But I could also say, having seen the movie, I can confidently say it was amazing.
Ooh, much better.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you're a movie critic.
It sounds so much more confident.
It does.
Yeah, so perfect participles aren't just for like formal essays.
No,
You can use them
you can use them anywhere.
every day when you're talking to people.
Yeah, it just makes your language sound more
Interesting.
engaging,
Right.
powerful.
Absolutely.
Now, the cool thing is once you start learning about this,
Yeah,
you see it everywhere.
you do.
Like books, articles, even just like,
Conversations.
conversations.
Yeah.
You start noticing it everywhere.
You do, and it just makes you realize how much thought goes into
Totally.
good writing.
So to wrap things up for our listeners today,
Okay.
the big takeaway is
Yeah.
perfect participles.
They're not scary.
They're not.
No.
They're actually really, really useful.
Yeah.
They can help you communicate clearly
Yeah.
with more depth and, even a little bit of elegance.
They can definitely add some elegance to your writing.
Totally.
Yeah.
But you've got to know how to use them.
You do.
That's the key.
That's the key.
So I'm going to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
How can you start using perfect participles to make your communication better?
Yeah.
Like, really think about it. Pay attention to how other people are using them
Yeah.
and try using them yourself. Experiment.
Yeah.
See what happens.
You might be surprised
It will be.
at how much they can change your writing and your speaking.
Absolutely.
That's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next time.
See you later. All right, everybody. Welcome back. I'm so excited for this deep dive because we are tackling something that might seem, at first glance, a little bit dry. But I promise you, by the end of this, we are going to be like linguistic superheroes wielding the power of...
Oh, I like that.
I know, right? We're going to be wielding the power of gerunds and infinitives.
All right.
So maybe you remember these from grammar class way back when.
Yeah.
And they might have seemed kind of like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But they're actually the secret to unlocking like this deeper level of meaning in our communication.
Absolutely.
So before we get ahead of ourselves, just to get us all on the same page,
Okay.
when we say gerund, we're talking about a verb that's acting like a noun. So it ends in egg,
Right.
like reading.
Exactly.
And then infinitive, that's one with to in front of it, so to read. And these little guys, they form what are called verb phrases,
That's right.
which can totally change the whole vibe of a sentence.
That's for sure. For sure. Like adding a little spice, a little something extra.
It's like a secret ingredient, right?
Exactly.
So speaking of secret ingredients, the source material that you sent me has this sentence. I love to read books in my spare time.
Okay.
Seems pretty straightforward. But I have a sneaking suspicion that there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Like on the surface, super simple sentence.
Right.
But if we just change one tiny thing,
All right.
swap out that to read for reading.
Okay, so I love reading books.
Exactly.
Now it's still grammatically correct,
Absolutely.
but the meaning has like subtly shifted.
Yes.
So it's not just about getting a gold star from our grammar teacher.
Right.
It's about actually making sure that we are saying what we mean.
Exactly. Getting that message across.
So what is the difference then between I love to read books and I love reading books?
Well, you see, when you used to read like that, it's like you're highlighting the purpose, the intention behind it.
Okay.
You're saying, I really value sitting down and getting lost in a book. But with reading, it's more about the activity itself.
Yeah.
You know, the physical act of turning the pages.
So it's subtle,
Very subtle.
but it's there.
Yeah, a slight nuance, but it can make a difference.
It's like we're painting with these tiny little brushes
Exactly.
to create this bigger picture.
I love that, yeah.
And I bet we get it wrong all the time.
Oh, more often than we realize, I'm sure.
Right, like we think we're saying one thing, but actually,
Yeah, it's a completely different message.
like what if we said he stopped responding to emails
Okay, yeah.
versus he stopped to respond to emails?
Oh, that's a good one.
Those are two very different scenarios.
Completely different. In the first one, it sounds like he's just done with email.
Yeah, you're like, I'm out.
Yeah, totally ignoring them. But the second one, it implies he was doing something else.
He was busy.
Yeah, and then took a break specifically to check his inbox.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing how one little word can completely change the story.
And we probably don't even realize it most of the time.
Right. It's like a hidden layer of communication.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what other kind of nuances, what other things can we do with these gerunds and infinitives?
Well, they can do all sorts of things. They can show purpose, obligation, even preference.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty long list. For example, if you say, I went to the store to buy milk, you're using an infinitive to express your purpose. But if you say, buying groceries is a chore, you're using a gerund to talk about an activity as if it's a thing, a noun.
Okay, so we're using them to frame the action,
Precisely.
to make it fit into the sentence in just the right way.
Yep, and that framing, it has a huge impact on the message.
This is amazing. So how can we, like in our everyday lives, how can we actually use this knowledge?
Well, the first step is just being aware.
Okay.
Pay attention to how you're using gerunds and infinitives already. Are you using the right form to get your point across?
Right.
Are you really taking advantage of all the cool things they can do?
It's like we've been given this secret decoder ring.
Ah, I love that analogy.
And now we can finally understand all the secret messages.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the easier it gets.
Okay.
You'll start to use them instinctively. You'll be crafting these super precise sentences.
This is incredible. I feel like I've learned a whole new language.
It is a powerful tool, definitely.
It really is. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. Thank you so much for this.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And for everyone listening out there,
Yes.
we'll leave you with this thought. Think about a conversation you had recently where maybe you didn't feel like you quite got your point across. Could a gerund or an infinitive have saved the day?
Interesting question.
Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so we're going to deep dive into some pretty cool grammar stuff today, mixed conditionals, and we've got some notes and examples here. I think you're going to like these.
Awesome.
So, I was looking through this stuff, and there was this sentence I saw, and it really just kind of stopped me in my tracks. And it was like, if I had known then what I know now, I would be much happier.
Wow.
It's so powerful.
Yeah, and it really like hits you right in the feels too.
It does, you know. And it's a classic example of a mixed conditional. So, and you're right, it packs a punch.
Yeah.
What's really cool about it is how it like mashes up the past and the present in this really unique way. So you've got the past perfect tense had known.
Right.
And that sets up this like, what if scenario in the past.
It's like a different version of the past.
Exactly. And then it shifts to the conditional present.
Right.
Would be, we're back in the present moment.
But it's like a present that's totally shaped by that what if from the past. And that's where all the power is,
Totally.
It's not just about imagining a different past.
Right.
It's about feeling how that past impacts your present.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So is that the only way to use mixed conditionals? Or?
Oh, no.
Okay.
There are so many possibilities.
Right.
Think about like storytelling.
Yeah.
A character could say, if I hadn't been so reckless in my youth, maybe my family would still be intact.
Wow.
Like that's full of regret, right?
Right.
Longing for a different present,
That's so powerful.
So yeah, it's not just about like, hypothetical situations.
Right.
It's about how those what ifs actually shape who we are and how we feel today.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like, imagining something. It's like really feeling that in the present.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you can use mixed conditionals for way more than just regret.
Okay.
You can use them to like emphasize consequences, Okay. Or to highlight a change in someone's perspective.
Oh, okay. Give me an example.
Okay.
How would you use it to highlight like a change in perspective?
So imagine a scientist saying, if I still held the beliefs I had at the start of my career, I wouldn't be pursuing this groundbreaking research.
Okay.
You see how that, their past beliefs would have totally clashed with what they're doing now?
Right.
Shows how they've grown and evolved.
Wow. You know what's so cool about this?
Right.
It's like you're taking two different points in time and like weaving them together to create like this whole new level of meaning.
Right.
It's like a time travel paradox.
I love that.
But in grammar.
Yeah, and the best part is you can use mixed conditionals in so many ways.
Okay.
You can use them for irony humor.
Oh, I didn't even think about humor.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if we're thinking about how we communicate, like this is like adding a new tool to our toolbox.
Absolutely. It can add so much nuance and depth to your writing and speaking.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can use it to create empathy, highlight complexity.
Okay.
Or even just make your point more memorable.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I think the main takeaway here is that mixed conditionals are way more than just a grammar rule.
That's for sure.
They're a way to express those super complicated feelings we all have about the choices we've made and the paths we didn't take.
Right.
So here's a final thought for you to think about.
Okay.
What's a situation in your own life where a mixed conditional would perfectly capture how you feel? Take a second to think about it.
Okay.
You might be surprised at how much these little grammar structures can actually reveal about your own personal journey.
It's true.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Really is.
Really is.
All right, so get ready because today we are diving deep into the world of emphatic structures.
Oh, emphatic structures.
Yeah, in English grammar.
Huh.
We're going to figure out how writers, use specific techniques to highlight and emphasize, certain parts of their sentences.
Yeah.
Make their writing more powerful and engaging, more interesting to read.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, make it pop.
Yeah, exactly.
Give it some punch.
Give some punch, some oomph.
I like it.
So we've got a few sources lined up.
Okay, cool.
And they all seem to agree on 3 main techniques for creating this emphasis: inversion, cleft sentences, and repetition.
All right, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so to kick things off, they give this example of a cleft sentence.
Okay, hit me.
It was only after the accident that he realized the importance of safety.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right.
I see what they're doing there.
What do you think's happening here with this sentence? What are they trying to emphasize?
Well, I think the structure itself is really emphasizing the timing of that realization, right?
Yeah.
It's not just that he realized safety was important. Yeah.
It's that it took an accident for him to finally get it.
Like a wake-up call, almost.
Exactly. Like there's this added layer of drama or regret because of that delay.
It makes you wonder what kind of accident it was, right?
Yeah, like did he have a near miss or did he see something really tragic?
Ooh, yeah.
The sentence structure itself prompts all these questions.
Gets your mind going.
Exactly.
Mhm.
That's what I love about these structures. They're not just conveying information.
Yeah.
They're shaping the whole experience for the reader.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, let's talk about inversion.
Okay.
Now, this technique, it seems to like flip the script on the typical English sentence structure.
Yeah, it's like turning things on their head.
How so?
Well, with inversion, you're reversing the usual subject-verb order.
Gotcha.
So instead of saying, he walked quickly down the street,
Right.
you might say, quickly down the street, he walked.
Ooh, I see.
And that shift in word order, it throws emphasis on the manner of walking so quickly, becomes the star of the show.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a neat trick.
Ah.
So could you overuse this, though? I mean,
Mm.
could you end up making your writing sound kind of unnatural or forced?
Oh, for sure. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Inversion, it's a powerful tool, but
Right.
definitely one that you got to use carefully.
Yeah.
Too much of it, and your writing can sound really stilted or overly formal, like a robot wrote it.
Right.
You want to use it strategically, like a spice that adds flavor, but you don't want it to overpower the whole dish.
I like that analogy.
Thanks.
Okay, so last but not least, our sources also talk about repetition as a tool for emphasis.
Oh, yeah, repetition. That's a good one.
How so?
Well, when it's done right, it can create this sense of urgency or heighten emotions and just make words so much more memorable.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech.
Oh, yeah. Everyone knows that one.
Exactly. And the way he repeats that phrase, I have a dream, it amplifies his message of hope and equality. It makes it impossible to forget. And you know what's really interesting is that these techniques aren't just limited to like formal writing or speeches.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we use them all the time in everyday conversations. Like, never have I seen such a mess, or that's the best pizza I've ever tasted.
Right.
We're all using these techniques, whether we realize it or not.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, but by being aware of them, it gives you more control over how you communicate, both written and spoken.
So you can choose when to emphasize, when to create drama, when to really make your words stick in someone's mind.
Exactly.
So to sum it all up, we've got inversion, we've got cleft sentences, and we've got repetition.
So trifecta.
Yeah, the trifecta of emphasis, all incredibly powerful tools for adding that extra oomph to our writing and making our messages more impactful.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, as you go about your day, pay attention to these structures. You might be surprised how often they pop up.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
In the books you read, the shows, you watch even your own conversations.
It's true.
And here's a thought to chew on. How can you use these techniques to make your own communication more impactful and memorable?
Something to think about.
Indeed, something to think about.
Well, this has been enlightening.
I agree. And that wraps up our deep dive into emphatic structures.
Until next time.
Until next time, keep those words flowing.
And make them count.
You got it. Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Always. What are we looking at today?
Today, we're tackling indirect speech, a topic that can be surprisingly tricky.
Yeah, it definitely goes deeper than just, rephrasing what someone said.
Right. We've got this excerpt here, and I'm really curious to hear your take on it. The mission today is to really nail down how indirect speech works. Not just the textbook definition, but how we actually use it in everyday conversation.
Sounds good to me.
So the excerpt starts by defining indirect speech as, well, reporting what someone said without quoting them directly. Like, think of it as paraphrasing, but with a few extra rules.
Rules, like what?
Well, the example they give is, he asked me if I had finished the report yet. No one actually speaks like that in real life, right?
No, not really. But that's the thing about indirect speech. It often shifts the tense of the original statement.
A grammatical time warp, you could say.
Exactly. Like in that example, the original question was probably, have you finished the report yet? Present tense?
But then, in indirect speech, it becomes past tense. If I had finished.
Precisely. And that's because you're reporting something that happened in the past. The act of asking the question happened before you're relaying it.
Okay, that makes sense. But doesn't something get lost in translation when we switch tenses like that? I mean, tone of voice and all that.
Absolutely. That's why context is so important with indirect speech.
Yeah, I can see that.
Think about it. If someone says, oh, they said they were too busy, well, the way they emphasize the word said can completely change the meaning. Are they skeptical, or do they genuinely believe the person was busy?
Whoa, so much can ride on a single word.
Exactly. And that's something we miss in written indirect speech. We only have the words, not the delivery.
Makes you realize how much we rely on those subtle cues in conversation, huh?
Big time. It's like, even without realizing it, we're constantly interpreting not just what people say, but how they say it.
So indirect speech, it's more complex than it seems. It's not just about grammar, it's about context, interpretation.
And misinterpretations.
Oh, for sure. Speaking of misinterpretations, where do you think indirect speech pops up the most in everyday life? I feel like gossip is a prime example.
Definitely. Gossip thrives on indirect speech. It's all about passing along information, often with some added spice.
True, true. We're embellishing, reinterpreting, adding our own little spin on things.
Exactly.
And what about in more formal settings, like, say, relaying instructions from a boss or summarizing a meeting to a colleague?
Perfect examples. Indirect speech can be really useful in those situations.
Why is that?
Well, it lets you condense information, highlight the key points, avoid those long, drawn-out quotes.
Makes sense. Efficiency is key.
Right. It's about getting to the heart of the matter.
So to sum it all up, indirect speech is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
It's woven into the fabric of how we communicate.
For sure. It's more nuanced than it might seem at first glance, though.
Definitely not just about swapping out quotation marks.
Exactly. We've got to be mindful of those potential misunderstandings. Always think about the context.
Couldn't agree more. All right, listeners, here's something to chew on as you go about your day.
Ooh, I like this part.
Think about the last time you had to retell a conversation to someone else.
Uh-oh, busted.
Did you stitch the exact words? Or did you perhaps shift things around a little? Embellish, maybe?
Maybe just a tad.
And think about the times you've heard others relaying information. How did their tone, their word choices, shape your understanding of the original message? Keep an ear out for indirect speech out there in the wild and see what you uncover.
It's everywhere. You'd be surprised.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time.
See ya!
All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something that might sound a little intimidating at first.
Uh-oh, what's that?
The future perfect continuous tense.
Ah, yes. Sounds a bit like a mouthful, doesn't it?
It does, but trust me, it's simpler than it seems. And we've only got this one awesome excerpt to help us break it all down.
Excellent.
So you ready to dive in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, so our source kicks things off by giving us a definition. It says that the future perfect continuous tense is used to indicate an action that will be ongoing at a specific point in the future.
Okay.
So I think I get the general idea, but what does that actually look like in practice? Can you give me like a real-world example?
Sure, yeah. Think of it this way. Imagine you're watching a movie, right? And you fast forward to a specific scene.
Okay.
The future perfect continuous tense is all about describing what will have been happening continuously until that point in the movie.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about something that will be happening. It's about emphasizing how long it will have been happening leading up to that future moment.
Precisely. Like, say, by next summer, I will have been living in this city for 5 years. It's not just that you'll be living there next summer.
Yeah.
It means that you'll have racked up, 5 whole years of experience living in that city by that point.
I see. I see. That really helps me visualize it.
Yeah.
It's like you're adding like this whole layer of history and depth to the future event.
Exactly. It really gives that sense of continuous action leading up to that specific point in the future.
Okay, but I got to ask, I mean, couldn't we just use a simpler future tense to say the same thing? Like, what's the real point of using this more complicated tense?
Oh, that's a great question. And you're right. In lots of cases, you could definitely get away with a simpler future tense. But the future perfect continuous, it adds this nuance, this richness to your expression. Like, let's compare I will graduate next year to by next year, I will have been studying English for 5 years. You see how the second sentence tells a much richer story,
No. Yeah, it's not just stating a fact. It gives you a sense of the whole journey, the experience behind it.
Exactly.
That's cool. Okay, I think I'm starting to get a feel for this. Now, can we maybe dissect an example sentence just to break down the structure of this tense?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Okay, so our source gives us the sentence. By the time we arrive, the band will have been playing for hours.
Okay.
So we can see all the components, right? Will have been plus the present participle. Remember, everyone, that's the oying form of the verb.
Yeah.
And then we've got that time marker, like, for hours.
Yeah, you got it. And all of those pieces, they're all super important for creating the meaning of this tense. You've got that future element with will, the continuous aspect with been playing, and that time frame, those hours that the action has been going on.
So just to put it all together one more time, the future perfect continuous tense isn't just about a single event that's going to happen in the future. It's about the experience, the whole duration leading up to that event. Right?
Precisely. It's like you are adding this extra layer, like texture and richness, to your description of the future.
This is fantastic. I think we've really demystified this thing. So to wrap it up, even though it might sound a little scary at first, the future perfect continuous tense is a really cool way to make our language more precise and expressive.
Couldn't agree more. And, you know, it helps us paint a more vivid picture of those events in the future.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, I encourage you to keep this tense in mind. Think about those times when you want to really emphasize the duration of something leading up to a future event. How can you use the future perfect continuous tense to make your story, your message, even more powerful and impactful? Now that you're in on the secret, listen closely. You'll be surprised how often it pops up in everyday conversation.
It's everywhere.
That's it for this deep dive. See y'all next time.
See you then. Bye. Bye.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to dive in.
Well, today, we're tackling something that might seem small, but trust me, it's a big deal in the world of grammar.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Those sneaky little things.
Exactly. We're talking about modals.
Modals, right. They can make or break a sentence, change the whole vibe, really.
Absolutely. And even if you don't know the official grammar terms, I guarantee you use them all the time.
Oh, 100%. It's like without even thinking about it.
Right. But thinking about them, even for a bit, can seriously level up your English, especially if you're aiming for that native-like fluency.
That's the goal, isn't it? To sound natural and effortless.
Totally. So to get us started, let's look at a super simple example from our source material. They start with a sentence. You should visit your doctor if you feel sick.
Okay, classic example. Simple, but it gets the point across.
Exactly. Because the key here is that should doesn't just state a fact like the sky is blue. It's giving advice, a recommendation.
It's like a gentle nudge in the right direction.
Precisely. It's not a command. It doesn't say, you must go to the doctor right this second.
Which would be a bit much, wouldn't it?
Just a tad.
Yeah.
Should leave some room for interpretation. It acknowledges that ultimately, the decision is up to you.
Exactly. It's like saying, hey, if I were you, this is what I'd consider. But ultimately, you do you.
Okay, so we've got should down. What are some other common modals, and how do they work their magic on a sentence?
Well, think of modals like different flavors. You've got your possibility modals like may, might, and could. They're all about expressing uncertainty, you know, things that could happen but aren't guaranteed.
Okay, so like, it might rain tomorrow. We're not saying it will rain, just that there's a chance.
Exactly. And might implies a slightly lower probability than may, doesn't it?
Ooh, that's interesting. So it's not just about possibility, but also the degree is possibility.
Precisely. And then you've got your could, which throws even more uncertainty into the mix. She could be at the library, means there's a chance she's there, but we're not really sure.
Wow, so many shades of meaning from just one little word. It's almost like a secret code. Now, what about when we want to express that something is necessary or obligatory?
Ah, then we bring in the big guns. Must, have to, even should can make a comeback here, depending on the level of forcefulness you want to convey.
Okay, so must is like the most forceful of them all.
It's definitely up there. You must be on time has that air of authority, almost like a command. No room for debate.
Got it. But then have to feels a bit different, right?
Right. I have to finish this report. Sounds more like a personal obligation. Maybe it's a deadline you set for yourself or something you feel strongly about completing.
So it's not an external force telling you what to do. It's coming from within. Fascinating. It's amazing how just changing one word can shift the entire tone.
It really is. And speaking of shifting tones, what about when we want to express ability or the lack thereof?
Ah, good point. That's where can and could come in, right?
You got it. I can speak Spanish is a clear statement of your current ability. But he could play the piano when he was younger, implies that he had the ability in the past but may not have it now.
It's like a lost superpower.
Exactly. And, speaking of can, it can also express permission, like, can I go to the bathroom? Isn't about your physical ability to walk to the bathroom, it's about asking for permission.
Oh, that's true. And that reminds me of a time when I completely misused can. I was at a conference, and I wanted to ask the speaker a question. But instead of saying, may I ask a question, I blurted out, must I ask a question?
Oh no, that's a completely different vibe. What happened?
Well, the speaker just looked at me completely bewildered. I think they thought I was challenging them or something.
Oh dear. But your mishap perfectly highlights how crucial context is when it comes to modals. The same modal can have completely different meanings depending on the situation.
It's like they're chameleons of grammar,
Yeah.
adapting to their surroundings.
That's a great way to put it. And this complexity, this ability to shift meaning based on context, is what makes modals so fascinating. We haven't even touched on the difference between epistemic modals and deontic
Oh,
modals.
hold on now. Epistemic what now?
Haha, sorry. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Epistemic modals are all about degrees of certainty. Think of it like expressing how sure you are about something. So, he must be home by now implies a strong belief that he's home.
So it's based on your knowledge or understanding of the situation?
Exactly. You're making an educated guess. While deontic modals are more about obligation and permission, like he must finish his homework. That's an obligation, a rule he has to follow.
Okay, I'm starting to see the difference. So it's like epistemic is about what you believe to be true, and deontic is about what should or must be done.
You got it. Two sides of the same modal coin.
It's incredible how these tiny words can pack such a punch. It makes you realize how much thought, even subconsciously, goes into choosing the right one.
Absolutely. We use them instinctively all the time, but by becoming more aware of their nuances, we can express ourselves with much more precision and clarity.
And avoid any awkward conference moments. This has been an amazing deep dive. Thanks so much for breaking it all down.
My pleasure. It's always fun to geek out about grammar.
Now, as you all go about your day, I challenge you to pay attention to how modals are used around you. Listen for them in conversations, in movies, in books. You might be surprised how much they shape the way we understand the world. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
See you then.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about something that might sound kind of boring at first, but I promise it's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's adverbial clauses.
Ooh.
I know it doesn't exactly sound like the most exciting topic, but trust me, these little things can really make your writing a lot more powerful and interesting and give you a whole new level of control over how you express yourself.
Exactly. Like, imagine having a superpower for your writing. That's what mastering adverbial clauses can feel like.
Okay, so we have some source material here that gives a pretty good definition of what adverbial clauses actually are.
All right, let's hear it.
So an adverbial clause is basically a group of words that acts like an adverb in a sentence.
Okay.
And an adverb, as you might remember, is a word that describes a verb, an adjective, or even another adverb. It tells us things like how, when, where, or why something happened.
Right.
Now, an adverbial clause does the same thing, but instead of just one word, it uses a whole group of words to give us more information about the main action in the sentence.
Okay, I think I get it. But can you give me an example?
Yes, so like, this is the example from the source material. Although it was raining, they still went outside.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
See how that although it was raining part adds a whole extra layer of meaning to the sentence?
Yeah, definitely. It tells us they went outside despite the rain. Makes it sound like they were really determined to go out.
Exactly. And that's the power of adverbial clauses.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just tell us what happened, they tell us why or how something happened.
It's like those clauses give us the context for the main action. They're like little mini stories within the sentence itself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
There's so many different types of adverbial clauses, and they can express all sorts of relationships between ideas.
Ooh, like what?
Well, there's cause and effect, for example.
Well, right.
Like you could say, because it was raining, they decided to stay inside. That explains the reason behind their decision.
Makes sense.
And then there's time, like as the sun began to set, they packed up their picnic.
Right. That tells us when they packed up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are others, like clauses that express purpose, condition, contrast, and so on.
Whoa. That's a lot of different relationships.
I know, right? It's amazing how much you can do with these little clauses. And one of the most powerful types, in my opinion, is the clause of concession.
Concession? What's that?
Basically, it's when you acknowledge something that seems to contradict your main point, but then you use it to actually strengthen your argument.
Huh, interesting. Can you give me an example?
Okay, let me think.
Something relatable,
All right, how about this? Even though I was exhausted, I stayed up late to finish that awesome book.
Haha, yeah, I've definitely been there.
Right, so you're admitting that you're tired, but you're also emphasizing how much you wanted to keep reading. That's concession in action.
Oh, I get it. So it's like saying, yeah, I know this other thing is true, but my point is still stronger.
Exactly. And it can make your writing so much more persuasive and nuanced because you're not just ignoring opposing viewpoints, you're actively engaging with them and then showing why your perspective is still valid.
Hmm, that's really cool. It's like you're anticipating the reader's objections and addressing them head on before they can even think of them.
Right. And it shows that you've thought about the issue from multiple angles, which makes your argument even more compelling.
So these adverbial clauses, they're not just about grammar, they're about strategy and persuasion.
Totally.
Now I'm really starting to see how powerful these things can be.
And the best part is that once you start paying attention to them, you'll see them everywhere. In books, articles, speeches, even everyday conversations.
Really? I never really noticed them before.
Yeah, it's like once you learn a new word, you suddenly start seeing it everywhere.
True, true.
So mastering adverbial clauses is not just about improving your grammar, it's about unlocking a whole new level of understanding and appreciation for the way we use language to communicate.
Wow. I'm excited to start using these in my own writing.
Me too. And you know what? Here's a little challenge for you and for everyone listening.
All right, what is it?
Next time you're reading something or listening to someone speak, pay close attention to how they use adverbial clauses.
Oh, okay.
What are they trying to emphasize? How are they using those clauses to shape your understanding of the topic?
Oh, that's a good idea. It's like a secret code waiting to be cracked.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And who knows? You might even discover some hidden meanings or subtle arguments that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise.
I'm going to try that. That sounds fun.
I think you'll be surprised by how much you learn. So yeah, that's our deep dive into adverbial clauses. I hope you found it as interesting as I did.
Yeah, I actually did. Who knew grammar could be so much fun?
Right. Until next time, happy writing, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Ever feel like your writing could use a jolt of energy? Like just a little something extra to really make it pop?
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving deep into a technique that can do just that. We're going to be talking about emphatic inversion.
Sounds intriguing. What is that exactly?
I'm glad you asked. You know how sometimes just changing the way you arrange words in a sentence can completely change the feeling it gives you?
Yeah, for sure. Like sometimes a sentence can feel flat, but then you move a word and suddenly it just has this impact.
Exactly. That's kind of what emphatic inversion is all about.
Oh.
Like, instead of saying, I've never seen such a beautiful sunset, you switch things up and say, never have I seen such a beautiful sunset.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that second one has way more drama to it.
Right. It just grabs your attention in a different way.
It does.
And that's the power of emphatic inversion.
Yeah.
It can really make your writing more exciting and engaging.
So it's like a secret weapon for writers then.
I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
But like any good tool, you got to know how to use it, right?
Definitely. So how does it work? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I did some digging, and it seems like a big part of it has to do with these things called negative adverbials. Words like never, rarely, seldom,
Okay, I know those words, but what makes them so special for this emphatic inversion thing?
Well, usually when we talk, we put the subject first, then the verb, I went to the store, like that.
Yeah, totally.
But when you put a negative adverbial at the very beginning, it's like you're shaking things up. Suddenly the verb comes before the subject, and it creates this sort of unexpected twist.
Ah, I get it. Like in that sunset example, the have comes before the I, which you wouldn't normally do.
Exactly. And that's what makes it stand out and creates that extra emphasis, like you're forcing the reader to pay attention in a new way.
So it's kind of like a little surprise in the middle of the sentence.
Yeah, I like that. A little surprise that makes things more interesting.
But I guess it can't just be about being surprising, right? There's got to be more to it than that. What's the real point of using this technique?
Well, the main point is definitely emphasis, making a certain part of the sentence really pop.
Right, like hitting the bold button in your writing.
Exactly. But it goes even deeper than that.
Okay.
Emphatic inversion doesn't just emphasize, it kind of colors the whole sentence with a specific feeling.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean?
Think about it. If you say, this pizza is delicious, it's straightforward. right?
Yeah, pretty basic.
But if you say, never have I tasted such delicious pizza, it's like you're expressing a whole different level of excitement.
You're right. It's like the person can't believe how good the pizza is.
Exactly. And that's what emphatic inversion can do. It can inject your writing with a specific emotion that a plain old sentence might not capture.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's like a subtle way to add an extra layer of meaning.
Exactly. And that's why it's such a cool technique for writers.
So as a reader, is this something I should be looking out for, like in my favorite books and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Once you start paying attention, you'll probably see emphatic inversion everywhere.
You think so?
I'm sure of it. And you know what? Recognizing it can actually make you a better reader. You start to understand how skilled writers use it to make their sentences more impactful and, well, just better.
I'll have to keep my eyes peeled then.
Definitely do. And hey, maybe it'll even inspire you to try it out in your own writing. Think about it. Where could you add a little emphatic inversion to spice things up?
Now there's a challenge. I like it.
And that's what deep dives are all about, right?
Ah.
Getting us to think in new and exciting ways.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, get ready, because today we are diving deep into the world of phrasal verbs.
Yeah.
And not just the easy ones. We're talking about the advanced ones.
Oh, yeah?
The ones that you encounter and think,
No.
oh, what does that even mean? You know, you've been sending us notes, and it seems like you're encountering these
Yeah.
in academic papers, classic literature.
Oh, absolutely.
It's tough stuff.
It is.
But you're smart to want to try and master this stuff because,
Totally. And you know
Yeah.
what's really fascinating about advanced phrasal verbs is how much the context really matters.
yeah.
It's like a linguistic puzzle.
Oh, it totally is like a code you have to crack, right?
Yeah.
And you sent it a good example.
Okay.
She always puts up with his bad behavior.
Right.
Now, if you just saw puts up,
Right.
you might think she's
Exactly.
put something up on a shelf or
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm putting up pictures.
right. But then it's that with
Yes.
that changes everything.
When with changes everything.
Yeah, the with changes everything. So help us break this down.
Okay, so put up with. It implies tolerance. Usually of something unpleasant,
Yeah.
and it's not exactly the same as just like tolerate
Oh, interesting.
or endure, right?
Okay.
Because tolerate feels more passive. Like I'm just
Mhm.
sitting here and taking it.
Sure.
Endure suggests more of a struggle.
Uh-huh.
But put up with, it has this sense of I am choosing to deal with this, even though I don't want.
Actively
Yes.
accepting this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm reading along and I come across one of these phrasal verbs that
Yeah.
can shapeshift
They do.
and change its meaning. What do I do?
Don't panic.
Okay.
First of all, remember, context is key.
Oh,
It's like, imagine, you're a detective at a crime scene, right?
okay.
You're not going to look at just a footprint in isolation.
No, you got to look around.
You got to see what else is going on.
Yeah, you got to see.
It's the story of the whole crime scene.
I love that analogy. So we're looking for clues in the words around the phrasal verb.
Absolutely. Who are the characters? What's their relationship? What's happening in the scene?
Uh-huh.
All of these can give you clues as to the meaning of the phrasal verb.
Okay. And I imagine if you're still lost, a dictionary
Yes. A good phrasal verb dictionary?
can really help.
Absolutely.
It's really amazing, though, how these seemingly simple verbs, put up with.
Yeah.
It seems so easy, but they add so much
I
complexity
do.
to English.
Yeah.
Do you think they make English richer
That's a great question.
or just more confusing?
They certainly add complexity. There's no doubt about that.
That is there.
But I think that complexity is what makes English so expressive.
Interesting.
Because phrasal verbs allow us to convey all these subtle shades of meaning
Yeah.
that we wouldn't be able to get across with just single word verbs.
It's true. I mean, put up with, tolerate, endure, bear,
Right?
all sort of similar but different.
Slightly different. Yeah. Subtle.
Okay. So it's like we're not just painting with black and white.
Yeah.
We're painting with
The whole rainbow.
the whole rainbow.
Yeah.
And the more you understand those subtle differences, the more precisely you can express yourself.
That's a great point. So the next time that you encounter a phrasal verb, don't just skip over it.
Right.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Put on your detective hat. Try to understand the context.
Yes.
You might be surprised by what you
You might unlock a whole new level of meaning.
discover. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That was a great deep dive today. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
See you later. Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're looking at something you might not even realize you're using.
That's right. It's those little words and phrases that connect your ideas.
Conjunctions. Like and, but, or.
Yeah, but we're going a bit deeper this time. We're talking about advanced conjunctions, the kind you see more in research papers and formal writing.
So like instead of just saying, the study found this and it's important because,
Exactly. You might say, while the study's findings are significant, further research is necessary due to. You see, it adds that extra layer of nuance.
I see. So we're not just connecting ideas, but also showing the specific relationship between them.
Precisely.
Okay, let's jump in with an example from your latest research.
Sure, let's say.
It says, in spite of the rain, we decided to go for a walk, but we brought our umbrellas just in case.
Oh, perfect example.
So we've got in spite of and but both working together there.
Right, so first you see the contrast, right? We went for a walk even though it was raining.
But we were prepared for it.
Exactly. Just in case adds that layer of caution. It's not just a simple contrast, it shows preparedness despite the contrast.
Makes sense. Now, I noticed you use however a lot in this section. Is that always the best choice?
Good question. However, is great for a general contrast, but sometimes you need something stronger.
Stronger? How?
Well, like, nonetheless, it shows that despite this contrast, this other thing is still true. More definite.
Ah, like it was raining. Nonetheless, we persisted with our plans.
Exactly. It emphasizes that the rain didn't deter us at all.
Powerful stuff. So it seems these advanced conjunctions really allow us to fine-tune the meaning.
Absolutely. Like, think about despite versus notwithstanding. Subtle difference, but notwithstanding has this legal, formal feel.
Ooh, fancy.
Right. Adds weight to the argument.
So any other types of these advanced conjunctions we should be aware of?
Definitely. We've got subordinating conjunctions like although, whereas. They introduce dependent clauses. And then there are correlative conjunctions. They come in pairs. Not only, but also that sort of thing.
Right, right. And then you have those longer phrases too.
Ah, those are conjunctive adverbs. Therefore, moreover, however even. They connect ideas across sentences.
Wow, so many options. Makes you realize how much control we have over our writing.
It really does. By using the right conjunction, you lead the reader exactly where you want them to go.
Now, looking back at your research, where else could you swap out a basic conjunction for a more advanced one?
Maybe in that section comparing economic theories. Instead of simply saying this theory argues this and this theory argues that, I could use whereas.
To highlight the difference.
Yeah. Or that part where I outline the historical context as a consequence of would really emphasize the cause and effect there.
Wow, that would make it so much more impactful. It's like giving your readers a roadmap to your thought process.
That's a great way to put it. Advanced conjunctions help us organize our ideas and present them in a clear, sophisticated way.
So to sum it all up, these advanced conjunctions, they add a layer of nuance and depth to our writing.
Yes, they do. And using them strategically can elevate your work, especially in formal settings like research papers.
Absolutely. So how can you use advanced conjunctions to improve your writing? Give it some thought, try them out, and see the difference they make.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.